A man who is not very popular in Edmonton these days goes to court tomorrow. Peter Pocklington is fighting an injunction that prevents him from moving his Edmonton Oilers hockey team. Kevin Tibbles now with the controversy on and off the ice.
Just 4 years ago, 3 Edmonton Oilers celebrate the last of the team's 5 Stanley Cups. Messier, Anderson, Lowe, all have been traded. The team's leader, the game's greatest star, Wayne Gretzky, sold to Los Angeles. The businessman behind the Edmonton dynasty now stands accused of dismantling it all. Peter Pocklington's team now sits at the bottom in the NHL, and fewer fans are sitting in the seats at Northland's Coliseum.
There is no master plan. I'm not interested in moving the team.
Just last spring, Pocklington said he wanted to keep the team in Edmonton, but the Oilers were bleeding red ink, and he wanted a better deal from the arena. Now, the story has changed.
If things come together in Minnesota, it's certainly something that I like.
Pocklington's threats to leave for Minnesota have sparked a legal and media circus in Edmonton. Fans rallying to keep the team, teams of lawyers getting court injunctions to keep Pocklington from moving. Pocklington's financial woes look like this. He owes the provincial government $42 million in loans for which he used the Oilers as collateral. He's also being sued by the province for $67 million for loan guarantees he allegedly defaulted on. Writer Peter Verberg says Pocklington wants to move because he can't afford to sell.
If he sold the team for $70 million, he would have to pay a capital gains tax, after which he would have less than $42 million left over, and which is what he owes the Alberta Treasury branch. So he's in a pickle.
I can't tell you what goes on in Peter Pocklington's head.
Bill Hunter founded the Edmonton Oilers. He says Pocklington's money woes are of his own making.
It's disgusting. It's sad because when you sell off all your players and you still maintain your prices, you're asking people to pay the same dollar to watch a little better than minor league hockey.
But now, perhaps for the first time since Peter Pocklington traded away number 99 and the other jewels in the Oiler crown, people in this hockey-mad city are starting to say, why not just let him take his team and go?
Until very, very recently, Canadians wouldn't have entertained such talk.
David Whitson of the University of Alberta maintains smaller Canadian cities can't afford big-time sports franchises and would be better off without them.
Indeed, I would argue that if the Oilers were to go and if junior hockey were to come back here, as I think it probably would, there would be more pops than their kids could go.
At the Northlands, the club now competes with Tampa Bay and Ottawa for last place in the NHL. For many, the battles in court have become more exciting than those on the ice. Kevin Tibbles, CBC News, Edmonton.
With only 9 hours to go before a deadline to purchase the team passed, the anticipation was intense. Buyers Group spokesman Cal Nichols didn't waste any time delivering his verdict.
This is going to be a great day for Edmonton. As of this afternoon, the Edmonton Investors Group delivered an offer and the required deposit to purchase the Edmonton Oilers.
But a $5 million U.S. deposit is only the first step in acquiring the team and keeping it in Edmonton. The Alberta Treasury branch still has to approve the deal, ensuring it matches one presented 30 days ago by American millionaire Les Alexander. After that, even more hurdles to jump.
We must acquire NHL approval for our group, and in addition, we must move to finalize formal documentation.
Still, today's announcement removes a cloud of uncertainty that's hung over the Oilers since Peter Pocklington announced they were for sale last June.
Friday the 13th, of course, will be a day to remember. And it's
the darkest cloud on the horizon, still Les Alexander. He's reported in the Houston news media today as saying his offer is still on the table and he's not giving up. But local buyers are discounting Alexander, talking like owners, and looking ahead to building a winning team with on and off the ice.
But once you get the good guys on your board, we have that now with this investor group, and now we've just got to operate it in a responsible manner.
And now our feature presentation.
So unless there's we find a way to share what's going on, unfortunately, hockey is a dead issue here in Canada, in small markets.
Someone once said, It's more important to the nation than many of the political ideals we pretend to believe in. The House of Commons endorsed it anyway, as Canada's national game. It's been called our winter ballet, the dance of life in a cold climate, the national drama, the national conversation, the one place where all the themes of Canadian life get played out. And now, it's in trouble. The Edmonton Oilers were one of the greatest hockey teams of all time.
Here it is, Wayne Lemoyne.
Led first by Wayne Gretzky, then by Mark Messier, the Oilers won the Stanley Cup 5 times in 7 years. Today's Oilers can play the game too. In the 97-98 season, they advanced as far in the playoffs as any other Canadian team. They reached the second round before losing to the Dallas Stars in 5 games. But they spend most of the season in limbo. This year, team management's focus is not so much on winning or losing hockey games. It's on keeping the team in Edmonton. This year, the storied Edmonton Oilers go up for sale.
Let's go! You got the train from hell.
After 20 years as team owner, Peter Pocklington is $100 million in debt.
I've therefore made the tough decision to sell the team. I've done my best to keep the team here in the past. And I'll do my best to sell the team to people who will keep it here in the future. My first priority is to seek out local investors to step forward and take my place.
Within weeks, Texas millionaire Les Alexander offers Pocklington $82.5 million US to buy the team and likely move it to Houston.
Yes, we do. We have a handshake agreement which is being papered over the weekend by our mutual lawyers, and hopefully it'll get done.
This is the 3rd time in as many years that a Canadian NHL team seems headed for the States.
Money, the team was finally sold.
Last time it was the Winnipeg Jets. The owner wanted a new rink. When he didn't get one, the team was sold to Phoenix in 1995 and renamed the Coyotes.
Hockey fans met again at Portage in Maine in the largest public gathering since the World Wars.
May or may not be the last hurrah for the Quebec Nordiques in this building.
That same year, the Quebec Nordiques was sold to Colorado, renamed the Avalanche. The same players won the Stanley Cup the very next year.
I don't think anybody's going to blame us by not taking the engagement to lose that kind of money for many years to come with no hope.
We haven't received an offer from local
First,
bidders.
Winnipeg and Quebec get in trouble. Now, Pocklington himself. The Texas multimillionaire is still interested, but local investors are staying away.
Welcome any offer from Edmonton to keep it here. If there are local buyers, show up.
The non-breakable thing.
One group of local investors has been trying to show up for months. Motivated by civic and national pride, Edmonton oil and gas executive Cal Nichols and his associates have been working hard to keep the Oilers in Edmonton. But they are running out of time. The sales deadline is Friday, March 13th, just 3 days away.
The facts are this. On the equity investment side, we are currently just under $50 million committed. We still need, as of now, approximately $10 million of additional equity. And I would like to ask anyone who is capable and interested in participating in our group to come forward as soon as possible, as our deadline is rapidly approaching.
Nichols has transformed his suburban Edmonton office into what he and his team call a war room.
Premier Klein phoned me at home last night and wanted to know what else he could do to further our cause to...
Their current money-raising scheme is to rename Northland's Coliseum Petroleum Place and have Alberta's major oil and gas companies sponsor the team.
And I told the Premier last night that another follow-up letter fax from him would be helpful, and he also agreed to make a few personal phone calls. And
Doug McFarlane works with Nichols in oil and gas. Reg Berry is in broadcasting. Longtime friends, they are accomplished in their fields, but most observers don't give them much of a chance.
For these companies, I think it's important they participate in community building.
Right now, I think we've got about $2 million new in new commitments.
The feeling is the Oilers will wind up south of the border.
$2 million a year over 3 years.
Besides these, the reality is that there's not going to be an announcement tomorrow, and we're going to be Friday, late Friday at best, because the guys just
are not. Leap of faith.
It's too many leaps of faith here, and we got some irons in the fire that still may materialize that may get us closer to where we want to be. So,
if hockey is Canada's national game, and the Oilers are such a legendary team, how can this be? Why is it so hard to keep an NHL team in Canada? Others, the NHL can do nothing about. Escalating player salaries is one of them.
There comes a time when
10 years ago, Edmonton's Wayne Gretzky was sold to the Los Angeles Kings because Peter Pocklington said he could no longer afford to keep the great one in Canada. Glenn Sather was the Oilers GM there. He still is.
We pay, talking about the Canadian teams, the majority of our salaries in US dollars. So we're paying almost 50% more than the American teams are. But there's no breaks for the Canadian teams. Calgary, Edmonton, Ottawa. Very difficult for us to compete.
Sather feels things are getting worse. This year, he and the Oilers may lose their star goalie.
We got a problem with Curtis Joseph. At the end of the season, he's going to be a free agent. You know, I've been trying to get him signed now for over a year. I've got to make a judgment on whether I keep Curtis throughout this whole year, this current year, or trade him. Well, if the American team wants Curtis bad enough, pay him whatever they want.
300 kilometers down the road, the Calgary Flames, unlike Edmonton, have a stable ownership. A 9-man consortium who are in it primarily for the love of the game.
Lots of tight shots of the ownership, I'll tell you. He didn't tight on that chairman of the board.
The Calgary GM Al Coates still has to make do with the smallest payroll in the league.
Yeah, and he can't play in these 2 games.
That's right.
His overall strategy is to build a team with players that are mostly young and unproven. This year, he's begun to worry about re-signing the team's only star.
Highest bidder.
Well, I would like to stay in Calgary for sure, you know, but hockey's a business now, and you know, I know Calgary's a small market team, and there's only so much money they're able to pay and afford to pay, and you know, I'd like to think that, you know, there's a deal there somewhere where both sides can be happy, and you know, all I know is Calgary, and you know, my memories of Calgary are, you know, fond, you know, 89 Stanley Cup.
I think Fleury epitomized a lot of things that are great about our game. And I hope we never lose Fleury, quite frankly, because nobody plays harder. I think when you're going to have one real good player like there in Fleury, you have to at least have 2 or 3 others. And so you're into several $1 million per player on a team. Now, are you better to go that course, or are you better to have 20 guys that are a little bit maybe lesser in stature, but really compose a close-knit team, a team that's going to work together and hopefully emerge together. And to some extent, that's what we've begun here, and that's the process that we're in. La, 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 la.
Marketing man and broadcasting executive Ron Bremner is the Flames president and CEO. He's the one who has to set the team's budget.
These aren't signatures. These are opportunities. We're just doing everything we can twice as hard because we have to keep up with Ken Dryden and Brian Belmore and the Toronto Maple Leafs in that big market. You know, if we can take in $4,000 a night from a suite, times 40 games, it's 160,000 times 2, that's $320,000. That's the left leg of a third line forward. So now what we have to do is go out and find opportunities to get the right leg. Now we start working on the torso, and that's what you have to do. And you have to break it down, as somebody once said, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's what we're doing. We're eating elephants every day here.
Back in Edmonton, the airwaves are full of ideas about how to save the Oilers.
Investment package together for the people of Edmonton so they could become.
We have 15 people holding one or more units at this moment.
For the ordinary Joe in Edmonton, like Green Bay did with Packers. Yeah. Do something like that.
The National Football League's Green Bay Packers have made their fans feel the team belongs to them by selling them shares. But Cal Nichols would prefer to limit ownership of the Oilers.
Yeah, well, they did this in Florida with the Panthers, and also it's been done just most recently in Green Bay with their football team. The thing is, I would prefer not to do it to the third year because of the limited partnership.
Nichols feels limiting ownership will ultimately increase the value of the team. That is, if there still is a team here in 2 days.
You can write a check for about $10 million, and that'll do it. That's all we need. I'll come over and pick it up.
I mean, our chances of finding, 100 people with $100,000 to get the $10 million that we need in the next 2 days, don't like the chances of that. I mean, we don't want people going out and breaking the piggy bank and borrowing money to do this because we can't guarantee them a return.
Imperial's management team wishes to advise that we decline the opportunity to participate in your proposal for the naming of Northlands Coliseum. Best of luck with your venture.
Today there's bad news on the petroleum place front.
We need money. Petro-Canada.
None of the big money oil and gas boys seem interested.
The equity guys in this deal that are putting their own money up have to look at this and say, I'm going to risk my money and find that the biggest corporations in Alberta aren't interested in, in commercial support. I mean, that's got to send up a red flag. You got to say, well, it's, you know what, maybe this isn't the right place for NHL hockey team.
The smart money may have given up on the franchise, but Edmonton's hockey fans are doing everything they can to keep the team in town.
Molson's went $1 a dozen, we went a dime. We're small, that's what we can afford at this time. We will do over 2,000 dozen out of this store alone. Hopefully that will make a difference. I believe it would just be an utter shame that we lost the team.
We've been donating $1 from every 10 wings sold, our chicken wing sales, and so far we have about $2,000 from that. Our 1998 All-Canadian Girls calendar, we've also donated $1 from that as well to go to the Save the Oiler Fund.
If you're in the States and you've got a team in trouble, you've got, for numbers, you got 100 people that can step in. Well, you're going to get somebody. In Edmonton, you got 10 people who can step in. Well, the odds aren't as good.
It'll be another Canadian team gone. You don't want that. You want to keep them here.
I mean, the Oilers sell out every game, and they can't afford to be here. It's sad. It's very sad. Winnipeg, Quebec, we can't lose no more. Hockey's Canada, not States.
If Canadian junior hockey ever does manage to turn itself around, it'd be nice if there were some Canadian teams left to play for. Right now, it doesn't look as though Edmonton will be one of them.
Bob, it would be one of the most important contributions made. I mean, that would be the thing that could take this thing over the top. Well, on a standalone basis, $1 US a year.
That's better than nothing. So this is down to perhaps they stay, they go time. And I'm sitting at table number such and such, and if there's anybody there that could pitch in denominations of $1 million or more, come and see me quick.
For the past couple of years, Canadian team owners have been meeting privately with the commissioner to discuss their common problems and possible solutions.
How you doing, Commissioner?
Doing great. Yeah.
Good. Competition is a beautiful thing.
I go to every building.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. I listen. I watch. I talk to the fans, and I watch the 3 or 4 games a night. I know what the problem is.
Yeah. You're right.
They have our room ready.
Jealous.
Yeah.
Most people running their own buildings now. An opportunity to try and help with events and marketing, ticketing, and ways of helping one another out. You know, with Montreal's doing a really good job with their building, bringing events in. We need that in Calgary. So does Edmonton, Ottawa. So I think the sharing of information is really what's paramount.
You know, I know you got a fistful of problems, but he's the guy I'd like to have on the other side trying to fix it for me.
I think we're paying for the room, so we'll say sit down. Yeah. Should we get going, gentlemen, if we can?
Whenever the question of small market team revenues crops up, Gary Bettman likes to talk about the NFL.
Had long been saddled with a reputation.
The Green Bay Packers are a small market team. They not only won the Super Bowl last year, they had an operating budget of $78 million US, $60 million more than either the Edmonton or Calgary hockey clubs. Why? Every NFL team gets a share of the league's $17.6 billion television deal over 8 years. Canadian NHL team owners are convinced it has to happen here.
If we get a third of the deal that the NFL got, it'd be wonderful for us. But we have to have a major television contract in order to survive. I'm talking about the Canadian teams. That's going to be the saving grace of the Canadian teams at some stage, especially Calgary, Edmonton, and Ottawa.
Nobody has to have us yet, but that's what we're working to.
The commissioner believes the NHL's big American TV deal is just around the corner.
The good news is, in an era of fragmentation, networks need something special that differentiates them. Live sports is those special things. So from our standpoint, people want to have sports. Okay, we're not comparable, nor is the NBA or baseball to the NFL. But it proves the point that sports is good programming. The NFL's in a class by itself. The NBA did well. And if we continue to grow and we're desirable programming, then our shot in the barrel will come also.
While they wait for that shot in the barrel to materialize, Canada's small market teams must focus on more mundane matters, like getting to the game.
That's it? Well, I didn't even look. I'm assuming it's probably just as bad. Oh, my sainted aunt.
Western Canadian teams must pay triple leg, right? Or more for their travel compared to teams in the East.
EF, so B's are middles.
It's understandable that the Oilers can't afford their own jet or charter flights.
We never get middles. We get about...
But the savings they make by flying commercial cost the team in other ways.
The decision has to be made between $2 million to go toward a player or operating the team as opposed to flying on a charter plane. The decision is fairly easy to make. Did anybody see Cujo? You seen him? The teams that charter probably have at least a 5 to 10 point leg up on everybody else that doesn't. Here, this is way too late to be arriving for flights.
Travel fatigue adds up. By the end of the season, it can cost a team a playoff berth or mean an early playoff exit.
It's not an easy way, and it certainly does have a bearing on how you perform over a long period of time. You do this for a year, and it's exhausting. He's still at home, do you think? No one that has controlled the purse strings for the Edmonton Oilers has done this with any malice. It's just a grim reality of economics. You only have so much money coming in, and instead of spending $1 million a year on airfares, you're spending $3 million. That's what a charter adds to your bottom line expenses. And if you buy a plane, like LA did and Vancouver has, it adds $10 million. Check him off too. Because I want to know what if there's one bag missing, I have to know the number. Is it better to sign another player or give in on a contract to keep that player in Edmonton? Or do we charter? I don't know. Maybe we should get the players to chip in. I don't know.
The real problem we got right now is that we're short somewhere around $10 million of equity, and I don't know where we're going to find it in 48 hours or less. But
for the local Oiler investment team, the countdown has now begun in earnest.
Jesus, if we could just get
48 hours left, and they still haven't raised the money.
With another half a dozen guys from around town, we'll get her made.
Local investors must know that in today's NHL, you can put a good team on the ice, fill every seat in the house, build a new arena, and still lose money. They must also know that doing anything less is not an option. Montreal recently spent $230 million on Molson Centre. Edmonton, prior to its current troubles, renovated Northlands to the tune of $30 million. Calgary's Saddledome renovation cost $37 million. Vancouver's GM Place cost $160 million. And then there's the Corel Centre in Ottawa. Built in 1996, it cost $215 million. It has lots of corporate boxes.
Most buildings don't have that level of suites. Most buildings are between 80 and 120 suites, and they're all at the 2 levels we have them. See, we've got 100 there, and we've got, I mean, we're almost sold out now.
Even the Toronto Maple Leafs feel they have to move. Maple Leaf Gardens may be paid for, it may have tradition, it may be intimate, but it was built in the Depression. Hockey fans have moved on.
We have to move because we need a bigger space that has more seats and more corporate boxes and more amenities, you know, for a fan. And those are the things that translate into the revenues that allow you to sign players and to keep players. I think as well as that, times change, people change, tastes change. People have said, I'd like a seat that's a little bit bigger. Why do I have to sit in a wooden seat? I don't sit in wooden seats at home. Why do I have to eat lousy hot dogs and stale beer? Just as Maple Leaf Gardens took the fan of Toronto of 1931 and put him into circumstances that were consistent with his circumstances of 1931, so will Air Canada Centre put the Toronto fan of 1999.
Some people have...
Morning, mister. How are you?
This year, the business of hockey has finally become a matter of public debate.
Thank you.
Canadians are worried about losing their teams. Canada being Canada, a parliamentary subcommittee has been struck to investigate. Commissioner Gary Bettman and the 6 Canadian team owners come to Parliament Hill for the hearings.
It's the beginning of the process of trying to prove to the world or the Canadians that we're not loaded, because we start off with 35% deficit right off the bat.
So it's at that kind of tax burden.
In the United States, it's different. The Florida Panthers' new rink costs $270 million. The county pays for it. The Buffalo Sabres financed their new facility with $15 million from the city, $22 million from the county, and $36 million from the state.
I thought it was outstanding. I mean,
The commissioner and the Canadian NHL team owners would like to see things like that happen here.
And welcome to our continued hearings on the industry of sport in Canada. Mr. Bettman, maybe you would properly introduce those colleagues that are with you.
On behalf of the entire National Hockey League, I would like to thank you for inviting our 6 Canadian... There were really only 2 points we were seeking to get made and acknowledged. The first is that NHL hockey is an important business, an economic engine. There are 11,000 jobs that are attributable to NHL hockey in the arenas. There's $1 billion of private money that was invested in infrastructure improvement in Canadian communities. That there's a couple to $300 million a year in taxes that our teams pay. And that therefore we wanted a recognition that we're more than just some sport, that we are an important business.
It's not a market problem. It's a Canada relative to U.S. tax and public policy problem. And I hope this committee will at least notice that it's true and ask the government to do some real analytical work to recommend what to do about it.
So are you saying...
What Dennis Mills' committee will do, I hope, is to set in context of why North America is absolutely critical to Canadian professional hockey. It would be absurd to say, well, let's just draw a line across the parallel and we'll play hockey in Canada. Lots of people to watch it. But it would not be the same. It matters that the New York Rangers are coming here tonight. It matters that you're part of the best in the world, not just the best in Canada. But if we're going to do that, we have to find some way to have the playing field not so completely uphill that the best players can't be held at the top of the hill. They just always run down to where the money is. And to do that, one can either find some way to tell the United States that you should legislate something to prevent subsidizing pro sports teams. Good luck. Or we can find some way to impose fewer public burdens on Canadian pro sports teams.
Kind of astounded when you find out that Ottawa had to pay for their own turnabout, you know, off the Trans-Canada Highway to get into their building. It's the only one that any private industry has paid for in this country, from border to border. It's the only place. And, you know, the money that Montreal has paid for the Molson Centre, the taxes they pay in that place is astounding.
We have given the three levels of government last year $30 million in different taxes. This includes the GST, the Quebec sales tax, the building tax, the business tax, and the capital tax. This is all revenue for the three levels of government, and they don't have to invest $1.
The issue is, are our teams being taxed into oblivion? The Montreal Canadiens spent $250 million of their own Molson's money to build a brand new state-of-the-art building in downtown Montreal, the biggest piece of privately funded construction in Montreal in the last decade. And in return for which, they get taxed at 3 times the rate of all the teams in the United States put together. That's not about us getting our house in order. That's not about us healing ourselves. That's about whether or not that team and that building have been fairly treated.
Is that sports...
The idea of NHL teams seeking government assistance offends some Canadians.
We thought of sports as a world apart that lived by a different set.
It won't affect Ken Dryden in a large market like Toronto, but he can see a bleak future for the small market Canadian teams if changes are not made.
What you can start to see happening in sports is teams that you say, they will never win a World Series. They will never win a Super Bowl. There is no possibility of them winning a Super Bowl or an NBA championship or a Stanley Cup. And you want never to get to that point.
Are we there on Canada?
We're not there, but we are. We're treading around the edges, you know, in some cases.
Edmonton's situation is again a case in point.
They certainly have some good young kids there, but will they ever be able to compete for a cup if the costs are so tightly watched? I don't know, the kids are probably, when their contracts come up, if you ask Glenn Sather in Edmonton, you know, the kids want to get out of there after 3 or 4 years. Glenn's very much tried to control his payroll so that he can afford to keep the team in Edmonton, and he can't keep them there.
If the debate begins and ends with the point that you're not economic engines, you don't provide jobs, you don't provide tax dollars, you have no economic consequence, if that's the conclusion, then we can end the discussion. But it can't be the conclusion, because there is an important, you just have to look at the communities they're in, there is an important economic component of what our teams provide.
If this issue was a Toronto issue, if the Toronto Maple Leafs were leaving Toronto on the same, you know, under the same kinds of conditions and economic kind of duress, I'll tell you, they'd be lining up on Bay Street at King to say, well, what do we do to help? You know, what can we do to help? And we got to fight and scratch and say, geez, we're out here 2,000 miles away, but we also have 5 Stanley Cup banners up there and a history and a legacy, and we need your help. And so far it ain't working. So there's only one group of guys now that are going to make this call, and that's the guys that are going to be sitting around tonight till all hours looking at each other and saying, are we going to go or not? And if we're going, boy, we're taking some huge risks.
For Cal Nichols, his lawyer, and the rest of the local Oiler investment team, the decision to go ahead with the purchase comes down to a last-minute, late-night meeting.
We'll have some additional things to do, and we hope to be able to finish them tonight and tomorrow, and If we're successful, we'll have a press conference, but I've said even if we aren't successful, we'll have a press conference tomorrow through the EDE offices, and they'll get in touch with everybody, give everybody lots of notice.
And how long are you guys going to be here, sir?
Who knows, maybe all night.
Do you know, Mr. Mayor, if in fact they have enough money right now?
At 8 the next morning, Nichols gets ready to make a public announcement.
I can do that. I can ad-lib that. But what I want to do is just good afternoon, everyone. And thank
He's
you.
learned
Thank
some
you.
hard lessons about small market team reality these past few months.
Encouraged us.
He's not
to
sure
this
an act
point
of parliament is required to save
in this
hockey
very
in Canada.
emotional endeavor.
But he does feel the league ought to do something.
I think there has to be some form of rationalization in salaries, because if it continues to escalate the way it is, I don't think Edmonton is the only team in the league that's going to be in trouble. I think the whole league is going to be in trouble, and the more they let this go on, the more they're driving it to a multi-tier hockey league without really telling the public that they've done it.
In the end, Cal Nichols has found not one or two, but 35 local investors. At a cost of $1 to $5 million each, they are prepared to make a leap of faith.
What we try to do is sell it on the basis of community first motives as opposed to for profit. And I like to refer to the group that we have brought together as really the blue-collar millionaires of this market, because many of them, they just are people who worked hard, got in the trenches, rolled up their sleeves, and have been very, very successful in manufacturing and distribution and in some of the oil field supply companies. So there's not anybody in this group that are junk bond dealers or a lot of major corporations. These are really grassroots millionaires that are participating in this project.
I think the plan is to keep it here forever. Small market, make it work in a small market. And I think if we can make it work here, we'll set a real precedent for Canada, for Canadian hockey, and we really, you know, it's part of our culture and our heritage. So let's keep her here.
Okay, is everybody ready?
Edmonton's hockey community has been forced to choose between good business sense and its heart. Unable to see the team go the way of Winnipeg and Quebec, the community has come down on the side of its heart.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I would like first to thank you all for coming and being with us. This is going to be a great day for Edmonton. As of this afternoon, the Edmonton Investors Group delivered an offer and the required deposit to purchase the Edmonton Oilers. I want you to know that our group of investors
When news of the Oilers' sale to local buyers reaches Glenn Sather and Peter Pucklington in Palm Springs, California, neither seems overjoyed.
It takes money to be competitive in the NHL today. They've struggled to get enough money to be able to buy the team, and now if they're going to give us enough to operate it so that we can be a major league franchise is one thing, but if it's a Band-Aid solution, then it's not going to solve itself because it'll surface again in 3 or 4 years.
Maybe they know too much about what lies ahead.
30 or so. The local group of 15 or 20 people, and with a big bank loan, are going to try and keep hockey in Edmonton. I wish them Godspeed. I hope it works for them all. I do know they're going to have some losses, or they're going to have to cut their payroll to where they might disappoint the fans with a team that might not show up on the ice. So they've got a real dilemma.
Skyrocketing players' salaries, heavy taxes, a declining Canadian dollar. The problems facing the new owners are massive and ongoing. But for now, it's mission accomplished in Edmonton. The Oilers didn't win the Cup this year, but they did manage to survive.
I do it because one day I'll be the best.
I do it because I want to give something back to the game.